We spend so much time running from ourselves, fleeing from what we know about the goodness in our hearts. We think we can escape the intelligence of our loving. Imagine you are standing before a bodhisattva, Jesus, Buddha, the first mother. It does not matter what you call the Holy One. He has dust on his shoes, and chaff clings to her, the smells of being alive. And shining from their faces is the beam of all their questions, the compassion of their living. Can you see yourself through those eyes? Can we know each other like this? We who no longer believe in messiahs can hardly believe in each other. Can we know ourselves seen and know each other this same way until our restless hearts learn to abide in this knowing, in this loving? Can we learn to live in this gaze of blessing? The reading, which I'll share before the sermon, was by Frank Forrester Church, a Unitarian Universalist minister who served All Souls Church in New York City. His father was Senator Frank Church, which some of you may recall from earlier times in more civil times, shall we say, in American democracy. And this is what Forrest wrote. In the National Museum in Jerusalem, I came upon a mysterious collection of tiny ceramic cups. It turns out that these were sacramental vessels. People cried into them. Think about it. Your mother has just died. Or if you have learned that someone you love has cancer, or your wife has left you, or you are struggling at work. More likely, you have simply broken down. Without warning, something hits hard and you burst into tears. So you pick up your tear cup and put it under your eye and weep into it. And when you are done weeping, you cap it and put it away again. It's a way to save your tears. Why save them? Because they are precious. It doesn't matter why you cried, your tears are still precious. They show that you care. A full cup of tears, you have felt deeply, suffered, and survived. In fact, if we knew better, we would cry far more often than we do. Life is difficult, and we pretend that it's not, that we can just breeze on through. Yet not a week passes that we don't have something to cry about. I don't cry very often, but I know that I can. Sometimes I cry during particularly wrenching news stories, even commercials. Put a kid in a commercial, and I'm a goner. So I know that I can cry, but when something happens that cuts closer to the bone, I close up. I protect myself. Even when my father died, it took me a full week before I finally broke down and cried. The main reason we have a hard time crying is that we are afraid of our feelings. Every time we express ourselves emotionally, we risk losing control. And on the other hand, if we get too good at maintaining control, the results can be even more disastrous. We take our feelings and strangle them. And then we are nothing but closed flowers, tight and frightened little people, pretending that we have grown up and hoping that no one will notice how deeply we really do care. At first, it's an act, a hard act, but over time, we get better at it, and it becomes less difficult because we really don't care any longer. If we don't practice caring and hurting and crying over time, we forget how. There is something to be said for this, of course. That something is invulnerability. Invulnerability. That word means not susceptible to being wounded. And the best way to protect ourselves from being wounded is to avoid love, or to love only in little ways, so that when we are hurt, we will hurt only in little ways. There's another advantage to bottling up one's feelings so they'll never spill into tears. We get a reputation for being strong. As the song goes, big girls don't cry. And we know about big boys, tough, macho, invulnerable, no tears. And by the way, there are two kinds of tears, tears of sorrow and tears of joy. And for this reason, the ancient Hebrews kept two tear cups on hand, one for when they were sad and one for when they were happy. Their tears were sacraments of love, of caring deeply, of being alive. The fuller that both cups were, the more a person was esteemed. Great-hearted people, it seems, cried far more readily than small-hearted people. Life touched them more deeply, not only the pain of it, but also the joy. Anyway, there I was in Israel in the museum, and I wanted to cry. I wanted to pick up one of those little cups and cry my own tears into it, and to save them, to remember them. I thought of how wonderful it must have been for some man who simply couldn't cope any longer, the pressures, the hurt. And so he went to his cupboard and picked up his cup of tears and wept. He wept into his cup of tears until he could truly say, "My cup runneth over." When was the last time you cried? Just give it a little thought. When was the last time you found tears running down your cheeks? Not necessarily the tears that well up when you're watching a movie. We all have been there. The music swells, the camera pulls away, and you're all but forced to cry on the cue of a clever director. And you find yourselves in a movie theater surrounded by a chorus of sobs and sniffles. No, not those kind of tears. The kind of tears I'd ask you to think about are the tears that come upon us spontaneously. You know, those moments in which you're just minding your own business, doing anything from sorting the laundry to driving down a familiar street, from watching a child from a window to coming upon a fragile Christmas ornament to hang upon the tree. And before you know what's going on, without adequate warning to preempt them, the tears just begin. Those are the kind of tears I want you now to recall. They surprise us. They stun us even, with their suddenness and their urgency that we cannot in any way turn away from. Most of us don't talk much about these kinds of tears because they're a little bit scary, I might even suggest. They represent a powerful kind of mystery at work within us, alerting us in some subtle but insistent way to intimations of ultimacy, which we have chosen to ignore for our own reasons, which now insist on getting our attention. They remind us of some deep, deep vulnerability that is breaking through a surface perhaps of competency and of composure that we have learned to master. Some better than others. I suspect that almost all of us are able to remember such an unprotected moment, whether it was shared with others or it was a private moment when something inside just gave way in a wave of tears, perhaps of grief, perhaps of joy, or pain, or anger, or gratitude, or love, or longing, or loss, or wonder, somehow washed over us until we had stopped long enough to pay attention to their deep source. Tears are a lot more complicated than we, I think, give them credit for. Somewhere along the way, tears were made synonymous, though, for many of us with sadness. Somewhere along the way, tears were construed to be perhaps even a sign of weakness. Somewhere along the way, tears were relegated to the realm of children and fragile women. Somewhere along the way, we came to believe that if you must cry, the least you could do is have the decency to do it in private. Myths, every one of them, and rather hurtful ones at that. I don't have any interest this morning in unleashing torrents of tears or making the more stoic among us feel somehow defective for their capacity to fend off tears. My intention for the two parts of this sequential sermon is to affirm the gifts, the real gifts that come to us from both laughter and tears, as two of the more profound physical expressions of our spiritual life. Reminders that everything about the spiritual life does not just exist in the amorphous realm of the mind, but it also is something that is embodied by our very being. Something that our body almost has the capacity to overrule our mind and bring up and through us the acknowledgement of joy, the recognition of pain. That word spirit, as I said 2 weeks ago, has its linguistic source in the word for breath. And as we all know, whether it's from gales of laughter or the deepest sobs of tears, we need to gather in more breath to sustain ourselves in those rich moments of being human. The saints and the angels may have found their way to a more placid and tranquil spirituality, but I will cast my lot with those who need a regular dose of tears and laughter to remind them to be present to the gift of those moments which burst upon our lives and in the twinkling of an eye somehow change us. Most of us have occasions to wonder at the appropriateness of our tears. We don't want to upset another person. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves that tears sometimes bring. We might not necessarily trust them as healthy expressions of our deep feelings. But maybe we don't want to burden others with our own humanness, forgetting that it's what is the common bond between every single one here in this room. This story from a wonderful collection of first-person narratives that is titled, "I Thought My Father Was God." This little essay speaks to the struggle that we share to break through the isolation of holding back our tears. It's called The Crying Place. In the early 1960s, when I was 14 years old and living in a small town in southern Indiana, my father died. While my mother and I were out of town visiting relatives, an unexpected and very sudden heart attack took him. We returned home to find that he was gone. No chance to say, "I love you," or even goodbye. He was just gone forever. And with my older sister going away to college, our home went from a bustling, happy family of 4 to a house where 2 stunned people lived in quiet grief. I struggled terribly with the pain and loneliness of my loss, but I was also very worried about my mother. I feared that if she saw me crying for my father, her pain would become more intense. And as the new man of the family, I felt a responsibility to protect her from that deeper hurt. So I devised a plan that would allow me to grieve without causing any more pain for my mother. In our little town, people took their trash from their houses out to large barrels in alleys behind their backyards. There it would be burned or picked up by the trashmen once a week. So every evening after dinner, I would volunteer to take out the trash, and I would rush around the house, gather up a bag and collect scraps of paper and whatever else I could find, and then go out into the alley and put the trash in a barrel. And then I would hide in the shadows of the bushes, and that is where I would stay until I had cried myself out. After recovering enough to be certain that my mother couldn't tell what I had been doing, I returned to the house and would get ready for bed. This subterfuge went on for weeks, and one evening after dinner, when it was time for chores, I collected the trash, went to my usual hiding place in the bushes. This time I didn't stay very long. And when I returned to the house, I went to find my mother to see if she needed me to do anything before I did my homework. And after searching through the entire house, I finally found her. She was in the darkened basement, behind the washer and dryer, crying by herself. She was hiding her pain to protect me. I'm not sure which is greater, the pain you suffer openly or the pain you endure alone to protect one you love. I do know on that night in the basement, we held each other and poured out the misery that had driven us both to our separate, lonely, crying places. And we never felt the need to cry alone again. I practiced reading that at home this morning so I wouldn't cry now. Although it would have been okay. As most of you know, I have 3 grandchildren. And so In the last couple of years, I have been reminded that before we have language, we have tears. They communicate something essential and urgent. And from the bodies of little babies, we can't turn away. And later, as we gain language, we need our tears less and less to express our needs, for example, and their primal value to communicate the most essential realities of our lives become less significant. And we look to rely on words. But we all know that words are limited. They can fail. They can often miss the mark of what we want them to express. Our tears elaborate the meaning behind our words and are, at their most basic, a metaphor for human feeling. As the psychologist Nico Frijda wrote, crying doesn't so much express sorrow or hopelessness as it is the feelings in behavioral form. It's how we give those feelings an embodied presence. So we can't just explain them away, denying their forcefulness or shrugging them off as a flaw in our character, perhaps. Like water flowing over stones for eons, they gradually and gently shape our character. And if we're fortunate, they wear smooth our broken places. I sometimes think of tears as God's way of getting us to pay attention to what's going on in some of the deepest places of our being. And I know, and you know, we all know, we can resist that all we want. And we can get very good at resisting it. But as our eyes fill up and our sight blurs, it becomes difficult to go on as if something and everything around us was just, well, okay. As if we were not so full of tears that they have no place to go, but pour out of our eyes and down our cheeks. You can never be quite sure where tears come from. But this much you can be certain of. Whenever you find tears in your eyes, especially those kind of unexpected, sudden tears, it is in your interest to pay the closest attention to them. Tears are telling us to take time to pay attention to something that we very likely have been neglecting. Where we have been, where we are now, where we are called to go next. Tears have a way of reminding us that we are made of the most common element in creation. These tears that flow down with us have everything in common with the sea. We are one with the streams and the lakes, with the rain that nourishes and cleanses and refreshes, that lets us clear things away and perhaps start anew, wherever we need to, and as often as we need to. Of course, every tear does not contribute to spiritual growth or insight. Some tears we know are manipulative, some can be contrived, some are caused by onions. But most tears of most of us hold the potential for a deeper intimacy and for hard-earned insight. And if we can resist the urge to swallow them back and brush them away, our tears can signal some of the most profound encounters that we will ever have with life and love and God. God being, of course, that mystery that's greater than all and that's present in each. That was Forrest Church's definition, which I've held on to. God being the mystery that is greater than all and present in each. I have no illusion of altering the cultural attitudes and social patterns of American culture in a sermon on tears. We've all been conditioned by our own families in this regard, and chances are each of us have some internal mechanisms that carefully monitor our flow of tears. And most of the time, I want to say it works, but that's really not the right word. It serves its purpose, let's say. But then there are times it doesn't serve its purpose. It doesn't work. And that is scary, especially, but not exclusively, for men. Tears coming forth from within are witness to the deep stuff within us that we have lost track of sometimes, that we've hidden or that we are hiding from. And that power over us can be immense. As witnesses to our interior life and as fluid forces, tears carry disconnected fragments of feeling together, almost like pieces of a puzzle. And those memories that we're trying to forget, those feelings that we are pushing away, those experiences that we would just as soon not connect, those untold, unfinished stories that live in every soul. All of these our tears have borne witness to. And all of our tears announce their importance as they flow. That said, it's been my own experience through life that the scariest tears are rarely our own. They are the tears of others. What's our first impulse when someone near to us starts to cry? Discomfort, impatience, anxiety. And what is our first response to that? Well, do we want to escape? Do we throw up a distraction? Do we try to get them to settle down? There, settle down. Everything will be okay. The translation of that is, stop crying. I remember a number of years ago, it was a day or two after my ex-wife died unexpectedly. And we were convening, my daughters and I, at my parents' house. And it was like the next day, and I walked into the living room and I was crying. And my dad looked at me and said, "What's the matter?" And I share that. I loved my dad an awful lot. But he wasn't much help in this regard. I think I was not very kind to him in my response. Maybe in some situations we imagine that we are comforting another by urging them to shut it down. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we're usually trying to comfort ourselves. And who wouldn't, really? Where others' tears flow from, so do our own. And that is a daunting reality, as we are all most fearful of that which is out of our control. I have chosen over the years of my own living and learning to adopt the simple truth that tears are a form of blessing. And as I think it was John Updike said, all blessings are mixed blessings. So yes, truth. Tears are a form of blessing. And they bless the moments that they intrude upon our lives with a kind of honesty, of ultimacy, of trust and truth. Those are things we ought not to interfere with. They're rather the biggies which present themselves to us. And they don't call for us to be comforting, but rather for us to approach them with companionship, with silent witness. Crying people may need comfort, they may need peace, they may need healing, but in that moment, they simply need to cry. So if you get nothing more out of this sermon than this, the next time you find yourself where tears are, don't do anything. Just stay put and keep breathing. Because the tears are going to stop. And then there's time to talk and listen and comfort. But first must come the tears. From where I stand on many Sunday mornings, I know there's something about this space that makes it safe for tears. And not just for you, but also at times for me. This place has been consecrated by tears of grief and tears of joy and tears of gratitude for 200 years. I know that some of you can cry freely, and I know how hard it must be for some others. Some of us might need practice with tears. Some of us might need a greater sense of safety for them to flow. Some might need to summon a kind of courage to really pay attention to the source of their own weeping. And that's what we're here for. It's something we do for each other, and in part for ourselves. We're like that little girl who was sent on an errand to the store by her mother. She should have been gone for only about 20 minutes. And after a half an hour, and then 40 minutes had passed, the mother grew concerned. And just as she was about to head off to search for her daughter, the little girl walked into the kitchen and dropped the sack on the stove. "Where have you been?" asked the mom. "Well, on my way home, I saw a friend from school. He'd fallen off his bike and the bike was broken and he was crying. So I stayed and helped him." "You don't know anything about fixing bikes." "Mom, I helped him cry." May we be as wise as children.